What's up, guys? Hey, I'm giving a quick tip on handstand push-ups. This week, we have our last week of the Open, 23.3, and my guess is that maybe they have some handstand push-ups in there. I'm not for certain on that because I think it's so obvious, but just in case, I want to talk about a couple standards that we've seen in the past and how I've tried to combat them in previous Opens. Okay, handstand push-up, typically you get inverted, you do your handstand push-up, you move on. In class, we typically have the standard of we gotta start locked out, go down, touch our head on the mat, our hands are at the same height as our head. So if we're using like an ab mat, we have a 25-pound plate, or if we have like a regular ab or mat here, same height, and then you have to finish elbows locked out, legs locked out, hips off the wall, head through the window. But there's really no standard for the feet. And the way that CrossFit did this in 2015 and a couple years after that is they started to make a standard that your feet had to get to a certain height. And that really caused a lot of problems with a lot of people. They've had two different standards, okay? And I'll show you here in just a second what it looks like for me. But there's two different standards. The first standard they did was in 2015. And what you did, you got to your wall, you put your feet against the wall, and you put your hands together, feet together, arms locked out, and then your judge would mark kind of your wrist. And I put a little pink mark here. And then your judge then takes a tape measure, and they measure 3 inches down from there, 3 inches down from that mark, and then that is your foot line. And now every time that you go to do a handstand push-up, your feet have to get over that line, okay? That became a big problem for a lot of people because nobody ever practiced getting their foot over that line. The second way that they did it was maybe the next year or the year after. They changed it because this gave a lot of people some wiggle room because of kind of the height of their arm and where they could reach. And there was some finagling that everybody does, and if we all know people finagle things. So what they did this year was they said, okay, we're going to mark the top of your head. We're going to measure the length of your forearm. We're going to take half of that length and add it to the top of your forehead. So for example, here's where I marked with this yellow chalk is the top of my forehead. They would take the tape measure and they would measure your forearm, right? I'm just going to roughly estimate this for myself. But you measure from the end of your elbow to your knuckle. Mine measures at 14 inches. So you would take 7 inches, you would add that to your line, and then that would be your line. And for most people, it was about the same. You could see that mine's pretty close, right, within an inch of each other. But it just gave some people a harder time because it did move it up a little bit. So how does that affect handstand push-ups? Well, we never really practice in our daily class workouts how high our feet are getting because we're really mostly worried about locking out our arms, right? And on strict handstand push-ups, which they did have that in the Open one year, your hands have to be inside a box. You can see a couple boxes over here. Hands have to be inside a box, and then it just goes to normal class, right? Hips off the wall, feet on the wall, elbows locked out, head through. That's the easy standard just as long as your hands stay inside. But this foot standard, and I'll kick up here in just a second, and I'll show you that your feet have to work to get high. So there's a couple ways that we could go about to combat the difficulty of getting our feet a little bit higher, and I'm going to go over those ways right now, but I want to show you kind of what it looks like to get our feet over. So if I just put my hands in my normal spot, you can see that it's really a different work and press to get my feet over at the top. So how do we combat that? Here are my top 3 ways. So my first tip is going to be making sure that our back is as close to the wall as we can get. Now when we're practicing in class, you know, we teach the tripod method, so head close to the wall, hands away. But some people just don't have the shoulder flexibility to be able to be too close. So it's okay in class if we get this like big over-exaggerated angle from the wall. Well, the issue with that is that you shorten yourself up, right? Because when we're measuring against the wall, you have to be pretty much chest, toes, and everything against the wall. So we're measuring you as close to the wall as possible. So the more you slant your body away from the wall, the further down your feet are going to be from being above this line. So it's important that when we kick up, we get our bodies close to the wall. And when we bring our body down to the mat, our chest, or our back, stays as close to the wall as possible. So our typical kip where we bring our knees down this way doesn't always work. And you kind of have to start finagling your knees going out a bit and kicking up that way, right, in order to get there. So a lot of us, we've practiced this whole year on tucking our knees to our chest and exploding up, and now we're having to try to go knees out so that we can stay on the wall a little bit closer. Okay, tip number 2 is kind of a double double tip here, but they have the same thing involved in them. And that's mainly just going to be to dorsiflex the feet, but it's also going to make sure that we get our hips off the wall and don't have this kind of, I don't know, slouched posture of our lower body or our hips open, right? We want to close them all the way and open our hips up, right? And shrug our shoulders. So basically, dorsiflex, hips forward, shrug the shoulders. That's the main thing, but dorsiflexion is the main thing. If you don't know what dorsiflexion of the foot is, that just means basically we're bringing our toes to our shins. And typically that'll reach up just a little bit more. So I'll show you. I'm going to kick up on the wall. I'm going to point my toes into plantar flexion rather than dorsiflex them so you can see that I'm below the line. And then I'll show you kind of a slouched hip and an inactive shoulder, right? So as we kick up to the wall here, I'll show you, this is plantar, this is my toes pointed. So if I curl my toes to my shins, I'm up a little bit. Now I'll get shorter if I put my butt on the wall. So make sure that we're dorsiflexion and butt's off the wall. And then if I relax my shoulders, I'll get shorter and I'll kind of arch my back a bit. So if I press into the ground, get my hips off the wall and dorsiflex, I get a little bit taller while I'm inverted, which hopefully will keep me over the line. So something as simple as dorsiflexion, getting the hips off the wall, shrugging into the ground, that'll help you out a lot as being a little bit taller. Okay, my last tip is tip number 3. And this is a weird one, right? Because it's not anything that's going to help you like right away. But my tip is to practice, okay? And you may not get a chance to practice if you have like a Friday Night Lights like what we do, but maybe if you're going to try to redo it. Let's say you try it the first time and you just don't get any handstand push-ups or you really struggle with the line. Here's how you practice it. And this was huge for me in 2015 when they first did this. My coach told me to get a body size mirror like the ones that you hang on the back of the door and set it up somewhere over here to where when I'm inverted, I can see myself. Because sometimes being able to see yourself and know what you need to do with your body and figure that out and seeing it can be a huge difference maker. And for me, my score went up significantly whenever I did that. And I actually even in 2015 kept the mirror up, put it back there so I could see myself when I was getting over the line. So if you have the ability to set up a line, my tip 3 is really practice, but practice with a mirror or something out here in front of you so when you're inverted on the wall, you can see your feet going over. Because watching yourself do that and even doing the workout with it over like that could really make you a big difference for you, especially if you're struggling to get your feet over there. I'm going to close it out with a little bonus tip, and the bonus tip really is just some handstand push-up technique stuff. This can help you whether you're doing handstand push-ups in class or in the open, and that's where your feet are actually facing. Whenever you pull your knees down, whether you're tucking your knees to your chest or if you're bringing your knees down towards, to kind of keep your back on the wall like I just showed in tip number 1, you want the flat of your feet, the bottom of your feet pointing up in the air. So whenever you tuck your knees down, you want the flats of your feet up. What this does is when you kick up, your heel is still up, right? What we don't want to kick is around and our heel be down, right? Because we're going to be harder to we're going to produce more force with our hip pushing up with our heel than we would with our toe pointing up. So no matter which version of handstand push-ups you're doing, when you get to the bottom here, the flats of your feet are pointing up in the air. So as we kick, we can kick up and make sure that we're getting the hardest kick that we can. So those are my handstand push-up tips for the open, plus one little extra efficiency tip there. Hopefully this helps you out a little bit. You can start practicing today and tomorrow rather than wait till Friday. Good luck.